Hello. So we're continuing on with Skellig today. So chapter 3. The garden was another place that was supposed to be wonderful. There were going to be benches and table and a swing. There were going to be goalposts painted on one side of the house. There was going to be a pond with fish and frogs in it. But there was none of that. There were just nettles and thistles and weeds and half bricks and lumps of stone. I stood there kicking the head off a million dandelions. After a while, Mum shouted me, was I coming in for lunch? I said no, staying in the garden. So she brought up my sandwich and a can of Coke. I'm sorry it's all so rotten and that we're all in such rotten moods, she said. She touched my arm. You understand though, don't you, Michael? Don't you? I shrugged. Yeah, I guess. She shrugged at me again and sighed. It will be great again when everything's sorted, she said. I sat on a pile of bricks against the wall. I ate my sandwich and drank the Coke. I thought of Random Road, where we'd come from. All my old mates, like Leaky and Coot, they'd be up on the top field by now, playing a match that had lasted all day. Then I heard the doorbell ringing and heard Dr. Death coming in. I called him Dr. Death because his face was grey and there were black spots on his hands and he didn't know how to smile. They told me to call him Dr. Dan, and I did when I had to speak to him, but inside he was Dr. Death, and that felt much better. I finished the Coke, waited a minute, and then went down to the garage again. I didn't have time to dare myself or to stand there listening to the scratching. I switched the torch on, took a deep breath, and tiptoed straight inside. Something little and black scuttled across the floor. The door creaked and cracked for a moment before it was still. Dust poured through the torch beam. Something scratched and scratched in the corner. I tiptoed further in and felt spider webs breaking on my brow. Everything was packed in tight. Ancient furniture, kitchen units, rolled up carpets, pipes and crates and plants. I kept ducking under the hose pipes and ropes and kit bags that hung from the roof. More cobwebs snapped on the skin of me and my clothes. The floor was broken and crumbly. I opened a cupboard an inch and shone the torch in and saw about 1 million woodlice scuttle away. I peered again down into this great stone jar and saw the bones of some little animal that had died there. Dead blue bottles everywhere. There were ancient newspapers and magazines. I shone the torch on one and saw that it came from nearly 50 years ago. I moved so carefully. I was scared. Every moment the whole thing could collapse. There was dust clogging my throat and nose. I knew they'd be yelling for me soon, and I knew that I'd better get out. I leaned across a heap of tea chests and shone the torch into the space behind. And that's when I saw him. I thought he was dead. He was sitting with his legs stretched out and his head tipped back against the wall. He was covered in dust and webs, like everything else, and his face was thin and pale. Dead blue bottles were scattered on his hair and his shoulders. I shone the torch on his face and his black suit. What do you want? He said. He opened up his eyes and looked at me. His voice squeaked like he hadn't used it in years. What do you want? My heart thundered and thudded. I said, what do you want? Then I heard him yelling from the house. Michael! 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 I shuffled out again. I backed out through the door. It was Dad. He came down the path to me. Didn't we tell you? He started. Yes, 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 I said. I started to brush the dust off myself. A spider dropped away from my chin on a long string. He put his arm around me. It's for your own good, he said. He picked a dead blue bottle out of my hair. He thumped the side of the garage and the whole thing shuddered. See, he said. Imagine what might happen. I grabbed his arm to stop him thumping it again. Don't, I said. It's all right, I understand. He squeezed my shoulder and said everything would be better soon. He laughed. Get all that dust off you before your mother sees. I hardly slept that night. Every time I did drop off, I saw him coming out the garage door and coming through the wildness to my house. I saw him in my bedroom. I saw him come right to my bed. He stood there all dusty and white with the dead blue bottles over him. What do you want? He whispered. I said, what do you want? I told myself I was stupid. I'd never seen him at all. That had all been part of the dream as well. I lay there in the dark. I heard Dad snoring, and when I listened hard, I could hear the baby breathing. Her breathing was cracked and hissy. In the middle of the night, when it was pitch black, I dropped off again, but she started bawling. I heard Mum getting up to feed her. I heard Mum's voice cooing and comforting. Then there was just silence again, and Dad started snoring again. I listened hard for the baby again, but couldn't hear her. It was already getting light when I got up and tiptoed into their room. Her cot was beside the bed. They were lying fast asleep with their arms around each other. I looked down at the baby. I slipped my hands under the cupboard and touched her. I could feel her heart beating fast. I could feel the thin rattle of her breath and her chest rising and falling. I felt how hot it was in there, how soft her bones were, how tiny she was. There was a dribble of spit and milk on her neck. I wondered if she was going to die. Before they'd let her come home from hospital, she had been in a glass case with tubes and wires sticking in it, and we'd stood around staring at her like she was in a fish tank. I took my hand away and tucked the covers around her again. Her face was dead white, and her hair was dead black. They told me I had to keep praying for her, but I didn't know what to pray. "Hurry up and get strong if you're going to," I whispered. Mum half woke and saw me there. "What do you want, love?" she whispered. She stretched her hand out bed towards me. "Nothing," I whispered, and tiptoed back to my room. I looked down into the wilderness. There was a blackbird singing away on the garage roof. I thought of him lying behind the tea chest with the cobwebs in his hair. What was he even doing there? I asked them at breakfast what was going to happen to the garage now. "When are they coming to clear it out?" I said. Mum clicked her tongue and sighed and looked up at the ceiling. "When we can get somebody to come," said Dad. "It's not important, son, not now." "Okay," I said. He was going to be off work today, so he could get on with the house. Mum was taking the baby for more checkups at the hospital. "Should I stay off so I can help?" I said. "Yeah," he said. "You can take Ernie's toilet out and scrub the floorboards round it." I think I'll go to school," I said, and I shoved my packed lunch in my sack and headed out. Before we moved, they asked me if I wanted to move school as well, but I didn't. I wanted to stay at Kenny Street High with Leaky and Coop. I didn't mind that I had to get the bus through town. That morning, I told myself it gave me time to think about what was going on. I tried to think about it, but I just couldn't think. I watched the people getting on and off. I looked at them reading their paper or picking their nails or looking dreamily out of the windows. I thought how you could never really tell, just by looking at somebody, what they were thinking or what was happening in their lives. Even when you got daft people on buses, people that went on stupid and shouted rubbish or tried to tell you all about themselves, you could never really tell about that either. I wanted to stand up and say, "There's a man in our garage and my sister is ill. It's the first day I've travelled from my new house to my old school." But I didn't. I just went on looking at all the faces, and swinging back and forward when the bus swung round corners. I knew if someone looked at me, they'd know nothing about me either. It was strange being at school again. Loads seemed to have happened, but school has stayed just the same. Rasputin still asked us to lift up our hearts and voices and sing out loud in assembly. The Yeti yelled at us to keep to the left in the corridors. Monkey Mitford went red in the face and stamped his feet when we didn't know our fractions. Miss Clark's got tears in her eyes when she told the story of Icarus, how his wings had melted when he flew too close to the sun, and how he dropped like a stone past his father into the sea. At lunchtime, Leaky and Coop argued for ages about whether a shot had gone over the line. Just couldn't be bothered with it all. I went to the fence at the edge of the field and stared over the town towards where I live now. While I was there, Mrs. Dando, one of the auxiliaries, came over to me. She'd known my parents for years. "You okay, Michael?" she said. "Fine." "And the baby?" "Fine." "Not footballing today?" I shook my head. "Tell your parents I was asking," she said. She took a fruit gum out of her pocket and held it out to me. A fruit gum was what they gave the new kids when they were sad or something. "Just for you," she whispered and winked. No thanks." And I ran back and did a brilliant sliding tackle on Coop. All day I wondered about telling somebody what I'd seen, but I told nobody. I said to myself, it had just been a dream. It must have been, right? Who knows? Find out next time.